talk here at ENOG, actually following on from my presentation last time in Moscow. One of the things we had, one of the usual subjects is what would be interesting for the region that we're coming to. And I have thought about this quite a lot, but then I sort of thought, well, actually, the issue of computer emergency response teams, or CERTs, or if you like, CSIRTs, is something actually that is quite important in this region. I worked for a long time as a coordinator of CERT, the European Forum of Computer Incident Response Teams. My involvement goes back to about 1999. The forum was set up in the year 2000. And I was actually the administrator of the forum for about 5 or 6 years, from about 2008 to 2012. So it was obviously quite clear to me that actually this region was one of these regions where there was a limited CSIRT capacity, and maybe this was something that could be quite an interesting topic to discuss. So, what is a CERT? What is a CSIRT? Well, that's the formal definition as defined by the original CERT, CERT-CC, which is based in the US and was established around 1988, I believe. Contrary to popular belief, a CERT and a CSIRT are actually the same thing. Originally, the term CERT was trademarked by CERT-CC, and they were a little bit... they didn't really want to license that to other teams. So in Europe, we came up with this term CSIRT, which became a sort of an adopted generic term to avoid the trademark issue. Things got a little bit resolved. Now CERT-CC are willing to license the CERT trademark, so you'll find this term quite commonly used, and it's fairly interchangeably used around the world. So what is a CSIRT, or a CERT if you like? Well, it's actually a team within an organisation that prevents, manages and responds to information security incidents. It doesn't actually have to be a team, it can actually be a nominated person. I was just talking to the guy from CERT AM in Armenia, who actually says he is the CERT. It's one person. But it can also be a dedicated team of security specialists. So it's very much there's a broad range of different types of format. But the important point is it's a defined contact point, both within an organisation but also externally where there are cybersecurity incidents. Now, typically, typically and historically, they responded to incidents. But as cyber attacks become more sophisticated, they have increasingly focused on prevention and detection, alerting, vulnerability analyses, also development of business continuity plans. So, if there is an attack, if it does cause issues, how do you survive these? But I think the important point is, and the message today is actually the coordination with other CERTs as well. They're the point of contact, so other CERTs know who to contact if issues are detected. Now, I did a bit of a survey as to how many recognised CERTs there are in the ENOG region. So I think there's, about 12 countries defined. There's about 15, I counted 15 recognised CERTs. Some of these are first members. Some of these are accredited by Trusted Introducer, which I'll explain more about later. Some of these are listed by Trusted Introducer, so that means they're recognised, but not to the same level. And they cover quite a broad range of what we call constituencies. So it covers things from our research and education networks, governments, and there probably are some national CERTs in there as well. I'm not 100% certain about whether some of these CERTs are recognised national CERTs, although they are quite probably the de facto national CERT in effect. I think the point to make there is that there's 15 CERTs. But just to put this into perspective, Luxembourg, which is one of the smallest countries in Europe, has 15 CERTs in that country alone. So this entire region has just 15 CERTs to cover the region. There may be others, but these are just the ones that are internationally recognised. The other important point is, I don't know if there's anybody here from Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, but there appears to be no recognised CERTs in any of those countries. So why are the CERTs important? Well, we heard today, I'm sure everybody is aware, that security threats are very real, very ongoing, and increasing in sophistication. And ignoring these threats actually ends up costing resources. So this ranges from denial of service attacks, data theft, but also the compromising of reputation. So the idea behind it is, prevention is better than cure. Small steps prevent bigger disasters, but also CERTs can also help increase end-user awareness, or at least organisational awareness of problems, and that can help mitigate some of these issues. There's been various surveys done that CERTs can save more money than they actually cost, but also they have the possibility to add some value-added services as well, and one would be, for example, business continuity plans. Okay, now, why the need for national CERTs? We've discussed what a CERT is, why a CERT's important, but we come to the issue of national CERTs. Well, CERTs normally serve particular constituencies. Often this will be government departments, the academic sector. The CERT community started in the academic world. Also commercially, so you'll have banks, for example, have CERTs. The RIPE NCC has a CERT, I believe. So they have very specific focus. But of course, security incidents are very often, if not always, cross-constituency, and very often international. So it's become increasingly important to have official national points of contact. And as well as that, having a national focal point where if there are issues within the country, organisations know who to contact to get information, to report problems, to solve these issues. The other point is that operational requirements for the national constituencies can be very different to other constituencies. So, for example, in a university, it may not need to operate 24/7. It may just be sufficient to work within normal working hours. But at a national level, you may need 24/7 coverage. And so there's maybe a different need there. But also, it's becoming, I think, fairly clear. I think nobody would argue or dispute that the internet has become a key element of national infrastructure, and actually critical infrastructure in many cases. So national CERTs can act as a focus for critical infrastructure protection. So the internet has become critical, very critical to national economies. The problems with the internet, the cyber attacks on the internet, can have a huge effect. So it's very important to share knowledge, resources and tools, compare different working practices, and actually develop some common best standards and best practices and standards. But another very important role is to encourage the development of functional or constituency CERTs. So individual organisations, individual corporations may not actually see the need for a CERT or an incident point of contact. And one of the roles of the national CERT can be to encourage the start-up of those types of organisational CERTs or constituency CERTs for particular sectors. And another very, very, very important point is it can help improve the coordination between law enforcement, security and military agencies. When I started with TFC CERT, that I have to say that the coordination or the cooperation with these other bodies was very, very poor. I'm happy to say that it's got much, much better in the last few years, and particularly with law enforcement. I think maybe in some cases military agencies could still, or military organisations could still improve. But it's certainly something that has greatly improved compared to the situation, say, 15, 20 years ago. And that has largely been down to the establishment of sort of national points of coordination and trying to get all of the different actors into the same, location. And there's also a role to provide technical advice on cybersecurity to policymakers, so governments, so laws. We hear many times about, should we say, very poorly drafted legislation, or very slow, governments are very slow to react to some of the problems with the internet. And a national CERT can be a body of expertise that can provide some advice and input into the formation of policy in this area. So what came out of all of these various discussions is that the European Union, amongst, well, in particular, called upon all of its member states to establish national CERTs by 2011, and I would say in the main that happened. I was involved in an initiative to make sure all of these were accredited by Trusted Introducer, and I think we achieved that with all but one exception, which I think was a great achievement. So there are now recognised national CERTs in all the European Union countries. Not just in the European Union countries either, in many other European countries as well, that's the case. So there's quite a number of different models that can be used. You know, there is no one size fits all. I think this is an important point to make. In some cases, these can be established or hosted or run by the National Telecommunications Regulatory Body. That's one particular model. In some cases, an existing government CSIRT took on the role of the national CERT as well. In some cases, the original academic CERT, which was often the first CERT in the country, that has taken on the role of the national CERT. And then in other cases, countries have actually created a completely new organisations or set up completely new infrastructure, and the national CERTs are hosted under that structure. So the question is, do you also adopt a voluntary or regulated model? Again, the important point to make about CERTs, it really relies heavily on the willingness of all the constituents, so all of the organisations and CERTs that cooperate in a country or internationally, they have to be willing to cooperate. And that's a model pretty much that's been adopted over the last 20 years. But in some cases, you know, if it's a case of issue with critical national infrastructure, I mean, there may be a case to actually require implementation of measures to protect that, maybe even only in emergency situations, but that's something to think about. And then do you adopt a bi- or multilateral approach, so whereby you have individual relationships with between CERTs, or do you have sort of more community-based approach where you get everybody into the same room and you discuss the various issues and problems? So just to give you some examples of the different model, I picked upon CERT-Gov MD, which is in Moldova. That's actually operated by the State Centre for Special Telecommunications. So this provides secure communications for the government institutions in that country. So very much a government-operated model. In the Netherlands, NCSC, this is actually operated by the Ministry of Security and Justice. And I think, I could be wrong, I don't know if there's some Dutch people in the room, but I believe that that's actually more or less a police force. So in effect, some of the employees are actually police officers. For NorCERT in Norway, I think we have a Norwegian in the room somewhere. This is actually operated by the National Security Authority under the Ministry of Defence. So again, I believe these even may be military officers in this CERT. I'm not 100% certain, but it's certainly operated under a defence auspices. But then you go to Belgium, another model again, and that's actually operated by the National Research in Education Network, largely for historical reasons, because CERT BE was the first CERT in the country. They've made a very good case, built their case to be the national CERT, so the government contracts them to provide the national CERT services. So very, very different models in different countries, and I think it's important to adopt models that fit your particular national circumstances. So how to go about establishing a CERT? So this has all been sort of quite formulated over a number of years. In particular, you can find a lot of information about this on the CERT-CC website. There's also links to this from the TFC CERT website. I think there's a link I can put in at the end. But the important thing is to define the basic framework. So, what do you do? What's your mandate? Who are you actually serving? Which community are you actually serving? So the definition of your constituency. And then who do you cooperate with? Do you cooperate with everyone in the world, or do you cooperate with only a certain number of teams? Do you only cooperate with teams within your country? It's very important to define that. So this includes defining the type of policies that you have, how you operate, what type of services to offer. You then need to train your staff. Again, I'll provide some pointers to that. And then actually set up your incident handling system. Following on from that, it's important to raise awareness of the CERT in the community. Your internet community, your local internet community needs to know that you have a CERT, this exists, it's operating, who they can contact. Communication is the key here. And then the next thing is to establish contacts with other teams to become recognised, to become accredited, and that also helps with those contacts. So you can define CERT services, really, you can put them into three categories. This is a well-known categorization. So the three categories: reactive, proactive, and then security quality. So reactive is about handling network vulnerabilities, providing alerts for that, and handling incidents when they happen. That can also include the follow-up, the sort of forensic aspect of that as well. When an incident has happened, try to find out how it happened, why it happened. Maybe you can help prevent that happening again. The proactive services, this is about information dissemination. So if there are known security issues, make people aware of that. You have to be a bit careful here, because sometimes you might not want to publish a known vulnerability before the issue is patched, because that will just expose the problem to a sort of wider attack base. So that's a sort of fine balance there. It's about doing security audits, looking at organisations, looking at systems, looking at networks, seeing where are the vulnerabilities? Are they running old versions of software, for example, that may be vulnerable? So it's undertaking that type of task. Also about developing security tools, so maybe monitoring tools, maybe intrusion detection tools, things that can help mitigate the attacks. Configuration and maintenance, so best practices for that. That can be included in there. And then finally, intrusion detection. So if an attack happens, that can be detected and maybe measures can be taken in time. None of these things are prescriptive. This is like a menu that can be selected by a CERT depending on its requirements. But it's just important to list the types of things that can be done. And then for the security quality, so this is about a risk analysis. So what are the risks to your network or to your organisation from external attacks? Well, internal attacks as well, by the way, particularly internally. That can be also a big issue. I already mentioned disaster recovery planning, but then also providing some consultancy services too. So, you can go to organisations and say, well, this is how, there's some best practices, how can you adopt that? These are some of the things you should be doing perhaps. Education is another important factor, so training, raising awareness of problems with users. And then finally, product evaluation as well. So the how to allocate resources to a CERT, how do you get it up and running? Handling security is a service activity. This needs to be looked upon as a service to the community and a service to your organisation. And it's also important that incidents require a timely and effective response. Time is very critical with this. It's very important to define roles and responsibilities within a team. Who is responsible for responding to something? Who should take action? How do you communicate problems onwards? And also the other important point is to say that a formal CSIRT structure is a requirement to join the sort of international security community and to benefit from that. So you really need to have an established structure, become recognised in order to participate in the sort of wider global cybersecurity community. Okay. So we really discussed about defining roles, defining the procedures, knowing which people do what and how within the team. And all of this adds towards an increase in competence from the internet community towards CERT, and also an increase in competence from the community towards the host organisation as well. So the CERT grows competence in the organisation that is hosting it. Of course, the goal is to actually ensure that the resources of the host organisation are being protected and managed, and data is protected, network integrity is ensured. Ultimately, though, better reputation means better collaboration nationally and internationally. So, some of the requirements for an operational CERT. The key point: provide and keep updated information about the organisation, the contact details, who is involved, an address, a website. The next stage is to get at least in the European region, which is essentially the RIPE the RIPE service region, which is this region as well, is to get a trusted introducer listing. So this is your first step to being internationally recognised when you get this listing. This does require to set up a list of operational requirements, which can be categorised as a must, should, and may lists. You need to define your operational tools that you're using to mitigate security incidents. But then the next step beyond being listed by trusted introducer is then going towards the trusted introducer accreditation process. So this requires a higher level of conformance to the requirements of being a CERT. There is a payment of a small fee, annual fee as well. But once you're accredited, then this is an important step in the recognition of your CERT. You can also gain first membership as well, so this is important for teams outside of the trusted introducer service region. It's important for all teams, actually, by the way. But that's another recognition of your status. So some of the things that you must do as a CERT is quite a long list. For example, provide and make available PGP keys for the team, keep an updated website, contact information, acknowledge incoming incidents and issue trouble tickets, form external CERTs of unexpected security-related information, and this is where the web of trust comes into play. You need to trust other teams. Teams need to trust you. It's all about trust. Provide feedback on the incidents. Provide incident closure. What's the status? Has the incident been resolved? In other words, don't leave the issues hanging. And then, obviously, standards in protecting personal and sensitive information. It's very important to have confidentiality, at least with respect to external organisations, other than CERTs, of course. And then standards for information confidentiality and handling. So some of the things that should be done, so it's not a mandatory but is very good practice, is to document best common practices, security practices. The policy for publish the policy for handling keys and digital certificates. So we've heard today about digital certificates earlier today. The classification of security incidents. There is a classification system that's recognised. I mentioned the importance of informing the external teams about progress. Trouble ticket system. Not totally mandatory, but quite important to keep track of issues. And then having your PGP keys countersigned by other teams, also a very important step. And then we the maze. Some teams adopt these practices, some teams don't. So the relating what the escalation procedures have been taken for an incident. So step by step, what's progress. Sometimes you may receive a report from another team. You may not be able to handle it, but then you may know who is able to handle that better, so redirects. And then producing automated information, possibly in the IOD format, which is a defined CSIRT, I guess, standard, you'd say, that you use for reports to exchange information with other teams. And then make available X509 certificates to other teams, including information about the issuing CA. Not all teams use public PKIs. Some have private CAs. This is not necessarily a problem. In some cases it can be an advantage. But it's obviously important then that's trusted. So I mentioned Trusted Introducer. So this is a service. It's actually operated by an organisation called CERT, which is the European Research and Education Network. This is run by, for historical reasons, by an academic network, largely because it was the first organisation to establish this type of service. So I already mentioned that CERTs rely on the notion of trust, whether the contacts are trustworthy or not. So TI was introduced to establish high levels of trust. So in the early days, all the CERT personnel, literally in Europe, could sit in a room. Everybody knew each other. They knew someone was trustworthy, less trustworthy, and pretty much everyone was trustworthy because that was the nature of the community. But as the internet grew, as the community grew, it just didn't become possible to know everybody in Europe. It wasn't possible to know everybody in the whole world. So there needs to be some sort of accreditation process or process. And there also needed to be certain standards as well. So what things do CERTs need to be doing to be recognised as CERT. So it's designed to provide sort of a standardization CERT. So basically, a prospective CERT needs to provide, I already went through what the requirements are. You need to have support of at least 2 other accredited CERTs in order to become a listed trusted introducer CERT. Other CERTs can object to you if they feel that there's issues with the team, and this does happen sometimes. It rarely happens, but does happen. It has happened. But anyway, once you're accepted as an accredited CERT, you're then contacted 3 times per year, and it's important to respond in order to maintain that accreditation. So basically, basic details are checked. Your contact details are checked. Your information is checked. Is it still valid? Is the team still operational? And you must have to respond to that. So ultimately, this TI service is under the auspices of TFC CERT, which is this European Forum for CSIRTs, although it is open to all teams. Training. There's been a long ongoing program since I think very early 2000s to train CERT personnel. So training is available for people wanting to set up their teams. Again, this is organised by TFC CERT. It organises 2 courses. You have the Transits 1 course, which is a 2-day basic course that covers. It's a very, very basic introduction to how to establish a CERT, how to operate a CERT, and it covers various sort of organisational, technical, legal issues around that. So this is the course to go on if you're really starting from scratch. And then there's a course called Transits 2, which is a 3-day advanced course covering much more advanced topics, covering traffic flow analysis, forensics, network forensics, how to improve communication between teams, and then it goes through a number of cybersecurity exercises as well, so sort of essentially role-playing and disaster planning exercises. So these are organised at regular intervals, usually 2 Transits 1 courses in Europe per year. There's usually 1 Transits 2 workshops per year as well. But it is possible to actually license this material to run your own workshops. You can also arrange for workshops to be organised in your country or in your region as well. And the other point to mention is this material has also been adopted by FIRST for their global training workshops. So this is widely recognised. This course material is widely recognised and is widely used around the world, and is sort of the established standard for CERT training. Okay, that brings me to the end of the presentation.
My question is, are there group cases when the CERTs were helping hackers to do their bad job?
I would say I think that the answer would probably be yes. I only know of anecdotal cases, but there were potentially a couple of teams in Europe where there was suspicion that was the case. But this was a few years ago now, but there were some concerns about what the information was used for. But actually what I would say is it's not even necessarily teams actually working with hackers, but actually what they're actually using the information for. It's not necessarily for bad purposes, but maybe purposes that aren't consistent with the CSIRT community.
Operational capabilities that were mentioned here. It's quite simple from my viewpoint. There are 3 core activities, actually risk analysis, incident handling, and sharing and collaboration. When it comes to having incidents and risk analysis, the bottleneck is operational capability this way you need to concentrate on high-level analytical functions and processing this information on relatively high level. And another addition, I was surprised. There's a document that was mentioned. It's ITU X800, X849, supplemental 15. Also known as XNCNS1, it's guidance for national cybersecurity centers for developing countries, and it's a good start for everyone. I think it describes ways to exchange information and organizational issues that are important as well. And I would like to make a correction to one of your slides because there was mention of CERT-GIB as CCTLD organization. It's actually private.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we have only only 2 questions, not 10 in one speech. Yeah. So thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you.